Hello and welcome to Art Show. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Astrid Bowlby. Hey, Astrid, how are you?
I'm well, Craig. How are you doing today?
Very good. So,
Good.
I wanted to start by sharing some work of yours, give
Great.
people an idea of the kind of things that you do. So, I went online and I selected a couple of pieces, no
Okay.
particular order. Can you tell me a little bit about this piece?
This piece is actually at the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. I was invited to do an installation, gosh, it's over 10 years, 12 years ago,
Hmm.
in their conference room. So usually there would be a large table in front of this with a bunch of chairs.
Okay.
And so that's what that piece is about. And that was really fun because I don't usually do things that are permanent like that, but it's still up as far as I know.
And what for those people watching this, what are these drawings? What are the shapes that I'm looking at?
So this piece is called Midden, and it's ink on paper. And I
Okay.
make a bunch of drawings on pieces of paper, and then I cut them out.
Okay.
And often some are representational. Like I know you can see things in there like sets of keys and like a Chinese takeout box. And then there are some things that look more like little bits of trash or crumpled paper because it's called Midden for a reason. It's basically a giant trash heap.
Are you hiding anything in these?
Well, I'm not really hiding things on purpose. Although
Okay.
I will say that sometimes other people hide things in my installations. Often when there are pieces on the floor and I go to pick them up, people have put little scraps of paper with drawings on them or other things into the installation, which is pretty fun.
I like that a lot. Um, this particular piece, I love the pattern on this. And, the first thing obviously comes to mind is brain coral. But I can tell that it's got something else in this. What am I looking at here?
Well, my patterns are often, there's a couple things that really interest me about pattern. One is natural patterns of growth outside, and I'm an avid gardener. So I really like that. I also like the microscopic for sure. And when people talk to me about the impetus for my drawings, I say that I make drawings that are pattern based because I'm a product of deep patterns. And I think that we are made up of little tiny bits, right? Little tiny wiggly bits.
Mhm.
The other thing that interests me is women's work, like weaving and embroidery. So those
Mhm.
things creep into the drawing sometimes as well.
How big is this piece?
Well, you got me.
Is it, I mean, roughly, is it huge or is it small?
So they range in size. When I first started out making these drawings, because they're made with rapidograph pens, so they take quite a while, they
Okay.
were all quite small. They were like 8 by 8, 10 by 10.
Yeah.
The largest ones that I've made are 30 by like 36 by 48 inches.
Okay.
But this one I think is probably more like in the, I'd say 15 by 11 inch range, if I were to
Okay.
guess.
All right. I mean, it means a lot for scale because it means, what kind of a conversation
Absolutely.
are you having with the viewer? So something
Yeah.
that's small really means you're asking the viewer to get close. It's a more intimate kind of a thing. Although on the flip
Yeah.
side, this would make fantastic wallpaper. I would love to see this as a wallpaper.
You
Just
are not the first person that has said that, and
yeah,
I concur. And
yeah.
I haven't ever gotten to the point yet, like to learn about using a vector program or to get some help doing that. But I'm not ruling it out at all. I think
Yeah,
it
I have
is
another
definitely.
artist. Another artist who does that. I need to connect you.
Oh,
This
that would be great.
this piece is very different, and I'm assuming a little bit older.
Actually, no, that is more recent, Craig.
Is it? Okay.
So yeah. So what is it? Gosh, it's so hard to distill this down. But basically, I am not interested in uh, creating what we might call a signature style. Although I would imagine that if we put everything together in a room, I could make a good case for how everything goes together.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trained as both a sculptor and a drafts person. So I
Mm-hmm.
double majored as an undergraduate, and both of those things have continued to be important to me. But when I lived in Philly, stuff started certain things got more attention than other things. And so I would be like, oh, okay, I'll pay more attention to that for a while. And so for a while, I felt like I was in a little bit of a cul-de-sac, and other people's expectations about what my work might be were maybe a little bit too much of an influence on me for a little while. And I struggled to get out of that cul-de-sac, and I did get out of it. So this is actually part of an ongoing series called Sampler, where I make two of the same thing. And it could really be anything. Sometimes it's two things that I bought at the dollar store that are the same. Or it's like this, where it's two sculptures of trees. And these are actually, the paper was used in another installation. And I recycled it, and I made this tree template and cut everything out and then stacked it up. So it's cumulative, like some of my drawings are, for sure. So I see that relationship. But in other ways, it's quite different.
Yeah, I like how you call it, what, a cul-de-sac?
Yeah, a cul-de-sac. And I was in a clown car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I talk to a lot of artists, and a lot of artists are starting to realize they're in a bubble kind of a thing. But,
Yeah.
I think I'll start calling it a cul-de-sac from now on. So I love this
Oh.
piece. So when I found this is at the Philly Convention Center, correct?
Yes.
And so when I saw this one in the first drawing, I can't help but think about those middle years of Dubuffet's work, where he was using those heavy black line to make those shapes. I mean, this is a lot more clear that you can see that it's floral, but just the way you're handling the line, I was getting those sort of connections. This is a
Well, I will
multi-panel
take that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
a
multi-panel. This is the largest piece I've ever made, and it was an opportunity. Again, it happened after the piece that I did at the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. But this is the largest permanent piece I've made, and it is on, I think it's 12 or 15 7 by 4 foot panels for the most part. You can see the one on the edges a little bit. There's a couple that are smaller. And then it's installed on cleats, so it can be removed in order to repair the wall or paint the wall or whatever. But it is very large and very permanent, and I am so happy with it. It was a joy to work with the convention center, and it was a real challenge to make. And I will definitely take Dubuffet. And I would also say that one of my other deep influences from when I was a very young artist is Keith Haring.
Keith Haring.
Pardon?
Okay. I was going to say Alashinsky.
Alashinsky for sure. I love him too.
Yeah, I can see that.
I've got a board of his on Pinterest. Yep, absolutely. And so we have these wonderful ancestors that we get to quote and bring in with us and think about while we're making our work.
Yeah. And of course, I had to, as a final piece, I had to include this one. So this is the series piece that you did at Edinger's studio. But I absolutely love this.
Oh my gosh.
I love this
loved working
patterning.
Thank you.
A small edition, correct?
Yeah, it was a pretty small edition, and it was, what is the name of it? When you have the same plate and you add to it progressively. So there's a series of prints, and each one has more work on it. And the first one is like, I think it's like just kind of like 13 little flowers that are sort of floating all over the place. And then this might be the next iteration actually of it. So this might be the second one.
These are just like they're progressive prints, progressive proofs.
And then and then the last one is really dark.
Right.
Dark.
Now it was too dark for me. This is the one I want. So I love it.
Thank you.
I think it's a fantastic piece.
Well, now, in that one you can see the influence of embroidery and lace making and things like that.
Interesting. So talk to me a little bit about this fascination with patterning and lace making and those sorts of things. But I want you to start at the beginning. Where did this really come from? Was this at your start of your artistic journey?
So yes, it was when I was a little girl, little, like 6, 7, I would make these dresses. I would not draw the figure, but I would draw the dress, and it was your basic princess dress. And it was loaded with as much lace as I could put on that thing. So there was that. Plus, the other thing was that I had a wonderful godfather, Joe Quintavalle, and every year, birthday, Christmas, Easter, other occasions, he would give me a book. And he gave me Edward Gorey books.
Okay, all
And
right.
not only Edward Gorey books, but Shel Silverstein, Tasha Tudor. So these clearly influenced me very early on, very early on. And then I think growing up, I grew up in a rural area with a lot of nature. My mom was kind of crafty, and I was interested in things like sewing and knitting and weaving. But I'll tell you, it's way more fun for me to draw those patterns than to actually try to make them. Like if you had me try to, like I could knit a scarf and it would start 6 inches wide at one end, and then 52 feet later, it would be 8 feet wide at the other end. Or, it just, I'm not, I'm technical, but those things never really caught on as things that I wanted to be doing with my hands. So all of that is in me, right? And then, an interest in biology and geology as an undergraduate while I was doing my art degree at the University of Southern Maine. I mean, I hopped all over the place. I actually started at Parsons School of Design in New York, and then I dropped out of school for ages. And then I finally went back to Maine and got my degree. And I studied sculpture because the best teacher for me at USM was a sculptor, and he's amazing. His name is Duncan Hewitt. And I was completely influenced by him. And I also was able to do independent studies in drawing, so I could do this cool double major, and it was great. I had great teachers all around there, and it was so inexpensive. Oh my God, it was amazing. But he said something to me one day about my drawing. He said he felt like my drawing was sort of like carving. So there's been always this sort of bit by bit by bit kind of sense in my drawing. In my drawing, when I was drawing for myself, I would say, I did figure drawing and other kinds of drawing as well. But when left to my own devices, I liked to build using small repetitive marks. I liked to build something pretty dense. And it started out as a fairy tale space for sure, like dark woods and things that you might find in a fairy tale book. And then things started changing. I would ask myself the question, does it always have to be this way? And, oh, what if I use, it's where you really start with a question. What if I did this? What would it look like? And it could be thinking about making a kind of embroidery or a lace work, or I make these drawings the series is called A Certain Density, and those are my darkest drawings. And those are, I would say, those are very intense drawings, and they start out the same way. And in a quick purview of them, they might look even the same, but once you start to really look at them, and you look at the darkness and you understand that it started as a white sheet of paper, not a black sheet of paper. Those are probably my most intense works, and I love them. I add a few every now and then. They're a little bit hard to make. They're sort of like, I don't know. They're not a marathon in that I sit down and do them until I'm blind, but they just take for so long that it's not something I could do all the time. I have to do some quicker things. And that's where the ink and brush stuff comes in, the more cartoony things. I think that was sort of a way to mix it up so that I wasn't always hunched over a little drawing board, a pitograph.
Your process sounds like you would be a natural for a woodcut or a lino cut.
Well, I mean, I do think printmaking, I have done a little bit of that, but not very much. And I do think you're right that it would be fun to do some, and it would make a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Well, you described the process of making it exact to how you make your trollings. Right. So it would make fit. I'm always fascinated. I asked that question about, where you get your start, because I love when artists talk about they had like a a flashpoint in the young life, and then it changes the way I see their work, because you telling me that you got books by Gory totally makes sense to me. I mean, I totally get that. So at what point did you decide you were going to become an artist? Was that before you even went to art school? You knew that was your path, or?
Well, that's a good question. When did I decide? Well, certainly I was very lucky to be able to go to a private school for high school.
Hmm.
It's called Waynfleet. It's in Portland, Maine. And I was able to get a scholarship to go there. And they had a class called Major Art. And major art was treated as seriously as, a math class or a social studies class. And so that was the first time that I was with people who took the things that I was doing seriously, and where I thought that might be a possibility. And so I did decide right out of high school to go to art school. And I did. I went to New York, and I went to Parsons for a year. But then I dropped out, Craig. But I didn't stop making work. But I also didn't really consider myself an artist. I mean, I know people that just loved their 20s and would happily relive them over and over. And I could not wait to see the back of my 20s. I was really struggling.
Okay.
And even into my early 30s. And so I did
Okay.
not, when I went back to USM, I went back very part-time, and I had a job. So I was someone making art. And again, I was treated seriously. And that's where it was suggested to me to consider graduate school, which I'd never really thought about. And again, it was the confidence given to me by my mentors, really, by Joanna Moore at Waynfleet, and by Duncan Hewitt at USM, that started me seriously taking it more seriously, or although I have to say, I really struggle with the idea of art making as a career. I actually don't quite believe that. It's maybe easy for me to say, because I have had some success, which has been really nice, but I'll tell you,
Right.
most of it was put on my credit card.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I totally understand what you mean. And I always floor people when I tell them that, in my experience, the largest patron of the arts are actually the artists themselves. When you look
right.
at I'm buying canvas and paint, so that's a commitment kind of a thing. So I totally get exactly what you mean about how tough the struggle is. I want to know, even starting in your 20s till now, do you feel like your work has changed over the years in that time period? And if so, how do you think it has changed?
So, yes and no would be my
Okay.
answer, which is sort of annoying, I know. But
Well, has it evolved then? Not
yes, it
changed?
is. So here's how I think about it. I think about it like the trajectory of something that's in orbit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's in orbit this way, but it's also doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So I revisit themes. It's
Yeah.
very clear to me,
Yeah.
and that's how I can trace everything back to those drawings of lacy dresses, or to Edward Gorey, right? I revisit themes. I did this thing when I was maybe 8, 9, 10. I'd go out into the woods, and I'd set up these situations in the woods. And they were a lot like some of my installations. Like I did one
Mm-hmm.
at Woodmere that was totally about that experience.
Yeah.
So of course I'm revisiting it in a more sophisticated way, I could say,
Yeah.
with, of course, much more knowledge and understanding. But I feel like it's that revisiting of these very deep
Yeah.
themes, these things that have influenced me for a long time. And I don't really want to give any of them up, which is why
Yeah. Well, I
sometimes,
get it. So
I do some sculpture, and then I go do something else.
let's talk about your methodology. I want to
Okay.
know, when you approach a work, how much of your work is planned out versus experimentation or play or change? Do you
Okay.
sketch
And
everything out? Do you
when
have
you yeah, when you say planned out, you mean like
you
here's
have
a
in your head, you know what
drawing,
you're going to do?
right? It is almost never planned out.
Okay, that's good. That makes you normal or
It's
average,
more
I should
like a
say.
question. It's more
Yeah.
like a question. So
Yeah.
I'll ask a question and I might be like, oh, I want to, I'll ask a question or I might have a problem. Like, well, I want to make some water. Well, of course, it's not going to be water. It's going to be blue burlap or something else. Or uh, I want to make an installation that looks like a painting, or it's like that more than. And then
Mhm.
I will make lists of things. Like often when I'm doing the drawings that get cut out, I will make lists of things that I could draw, right? So that if I get stuck, I'm like, oh, what am I going to draw now? Because usually I'm drawing them out of my head. Sometimes I
Right.
do draw from life. I'll just grab a milk bottle or an apple or a pine
Right.
cone, whatever. The other thing I started doing though was also really using Pinterest. I mean, if anyone wants to understand my brain, they should go to
Uh-huh.
my Pinterest because I have pinned over 1 million images
Yeah.
and they're in different situations. I actually started using Pinterest when I was a teacher because I would say things like Jean Dubuffet and they get a blank look and I'd be like,
Right.
oh, all
Right.
right, well, let's go
Here's
to
how the
Pinterest.
right.
Here's like 57 images of Jean Dubuffet.
Well,
Oh,
let me ask you this. Say you're in your studio and you're going to make something new
yeah.
and you have, you're not walking into the studio with any ideas. What inspires your creativity? What gets you moving? And I'll give you an example. I have some artist friends who will say, "Oh, well, for me it's about literature and what I'm reading or what." And other people will say, "Well, for me it's all about, what's in my garden at the time." And so what is it that gets your creativity moving?
So I would say there's a few things. They would all fall under the heading gathering and arranging.
Okay.
Gathering and arranging. So sometimes they're gathering and arranging like in Pinterest, or they could be that I'm going on a woods walk and there's a bunch of lichen covered branches or leaves, or I started carrying my phone with me and taking pictures. There's that. But if you went into my studio, it is not a pristine cube filled with a chair and a paint spattered floor. It
Those
looks
are the
more
worst
like the
artists.
the boudoir of your grandmother.
Uh-huh.
It's just like filled with crap up to my eyeballs. So
Hmm.
I just start looking around.
That's hilarious because your work is so clean, right? So it's the opposite of what you
It
got.
is.
So speaking of clean work, I want to know when you're making something, are you ever thinking of the viewer and the conversation you're having with the viewers as you're making the work, or is your work more about a conversation with yourself, or maybe a combination?
I never think about the viewer.
Okay.
Is that terrible?
No.
No, I actually don't think it is my responsibility to think about the viewer. I think it is the viewer's responsibility to think about the viewer.
So then if you don't think about the viewer, when somebody looks at your work, are you hoping they'll walk away with something? And if so, what?
Yes, I am hoping they'll walk away with something, and I have no idea what it will be because my
Okay.
artwork is at its best for me.
Okay.
For me, the
Uh-huh.
best artwork and the best artwork that I make is like an empty container that either gets filled up by me, right? And I like that, right? And that's my personal relationship to the work, or it gets filled up by the viewer. And not every viewer can fill it up, right? Not everybody can put something in that container, and that's okay. But a
Hmm.
lot of people can, and there should be a lot of things they should be able to put in that container. There shouldn't just be one thing. And I feel like if there's one thing, then maybe that's not something I would feel proud about. I would feel like I'm not doing my job. That's not my responsibility as an artist. My
How often are
responsibility is to, oh, how often what?
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, I was just thinking that it's my responsibility to not do that,
Okay.
to make them have an experience that is um that tells them something about themselves. And I can't do that, right? Because I don't know them.
You can trick them. You can lead them in certain directions. I would argue that point. So when you're in your studio, how often are you in your studio?
Well, right now I'm getting over a leg injury. So
Okay.
I'm not in my studio. However, pretty soon I will be because we're setting up a way for me to get up the stairs. But
Okay.
I have a pad of tracing paper, and I have some art materials, and I've been drawing every day and
Okay.
also taking notes. And I've been hard on Pinterest for sure,
Okay.
um, planning things. So I too am quite interested in reading as a jumping off point, and often that comes out in my titles. And though I would say that I have started using text in some of my work as
Hmm.
well.
Okay.
So there's plenty to think about right now. So I feel like even though I'm not in the physical space of my studio, I'm in a studio, what I'd say in studio head, you know what I mean? Um,
I get you.
uh, but the other thing, to be frank with you, is the last 5 years since I moved out of Philadelphia, I did have a show at Towson that was very important to me, a one-person show. I showed a lot of the sampler pieces that I'd been working on, but I also took a step back after 20 years of like making till I thought I was going to kill myself, just like really a lot. Like I look back and I think, how the heck did I do that? Because I didn't have assistants, and I made some
Right.
really big installations.
Right.
And I thought, I need to stop doing that for a minute and see what that feels like. Because I felt like, not like I was out of control, but I want, if I'm going to bother if I'm going to bother to oversaturate an already oversaturated world, we're oversaturated with things, with images, with
Mhm.
objects. If I'm going to make something, I want it to be really good. I want there to be a point. I want it to be really good.
Okay.
And I know how to make stuff. I don't have to prove to anyone any of that. It's not the same when you're a younger artist and you're trying to figure it all out, and you don't even think you have any chops. You've got a lot to prove to yourself, to other people. Well, I don't have to do that anymore. So that's very nice. Um, and I really enjoyed it, because it's not that I haven't thought about making art. I think about it all the time, but I stopped doing it. I did some other things. I gardened. I did some flower arranging.
Hmm.
I've done some other things, all the while taking notes, making sketches. Um, Part of this was also technical, like moving was a trial. Transition is, a bitch goddess from hell. So it was just a good reason to stop.
Okay.
Um, and that's been very interesting,
Yeah.
right? Oh, what if I never make artwork again? What would that mean? Well, I'm going to make artwork again. I'm not
Well,
really worried about it.
I can tell you that a lot of artists who do that, and myself included, when you stop, and if you do start up a while, be prepared to be dazzled, because it's amazing what
Oh,
your brain holds back like a dam kind of a thing. So I think we're in for a treat with your next stuff. Well,
oh, thank you.
Astrid,
I hope so.
I can't thank you enough for coming by to talk to me today. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But it's been a pleasure talking to you about your work. I love the insights. I got to go back and look, especially at those titles now. I want to see if there's anything there about literary referencing that I can find. I also want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch today. We really appreciate your support. Of course, we love it when you like and subscribe to ArtShow. If you have any questions for us, feel free to put them in the comments section. If we can't answer them, we can pass them along to Astrid. So thank you very much for watching today. And again, Astrid, thank you very much for coming by to
Thank
talk to
you,
me.
Craig.
I really appreciate it.
It
Have a
was
great
my
day.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Take care.